All right, guys, thanks for coming. My name is Chris Parente, P-A-R-E-N-T-E. To my left is Mike Gallagher. To his left is Damon Sharonis. And we have Marimar Martinez here as well. You know, I think everyone saw that the U.S. Attorney's Office, after months of refusing to disclose the evidence, last night to sort of take the sting out of things, released it, which is somewhat ironic given the fact that they fought for weeks to avoid having that happen. I wish it didn't take hours of my time filing motions and a tongue lashing from a federal judge for the U.S. Attorney's Office to do the right thing, but they finally did it. You guys got to see a lot of it last night, not everything. You'll see some stuff in our presentation today that's different. But I think, you got to see why it matters that people can actually see the real evidence as opposed to the false claims by our government. I mean, we live in a strange time right now where we cannot trust our federal government. I've never lived through anything like that. Marimar has never lived through something like that. This is a time where we just cannot trust the words of our federal officials, and that's disappointing. So today we kind of want to go through some of the key evidence in this case now that it's released and now that we can actually talk about it and show you why we knew from the beginning that this would never result in a conviction, that we were going to either head towards a not guilty verdict by the jury or the U.S. Attorney's Office would do the right thing and dismiss the case, which they eventually did. All right, so let's see. So the first lie, which I think everyone now knows and which the judge kind of harped on when she kind of reprimanded the U.S. Attorney's Office for refusing to kind of untie our hands, is that Marimar is a domestic terrorist. I think you guys have seen her enough. You know her story. She's the farthest thing from a domestic terrorist that anyone can be, and it's why we've continued to fight this. Most people, after their criminal indictment has been dismissed, would stop fighting. But to have your own government call you something as hurtful and as harmful as a domestic terrorist when you know you're not is just unacceptable, and it's why Marimar instructed her team to continue to fight, to continue to push back against the U.S. Attorney's Office, to continue to push back against Kristi Noem, and that's why we did that. So from the beginning, right, from I think within an hour of the actual incident, DHS branded her a domestic terrorist. The same thing they did to Renee Good, the same thing they did to Mr. Preddy. Kash Patel, again, this is still up. Like, the director of the FBI has still not removed this tweet, which again brands Marimar as a domestic terrorist and links the wrong incident. And despite, as you can see at the bottom, the Twitter warning that this is not true. How can we have an FBI director who continues to put out false information to the American public and won't change it even after the Department of Justice comes out and says, this isn't right. We're not going to pursue these charges. As a former federal prosecutor, it's extremely disappointing. As a person who is still friends with current FBI agents, it is extremely upsetting that the FBI director will not remove this tweet and help clear Marimar's name. The truth is, as you guys know, she's a U.S. citizen. She was born and raised here in Chicago. She has no criminal history, never even a parking ticket before this happened. And she's a Montessori school teacher who spends her days teaching kids of this district life skills. And on the day in question, she was on her way to donate clothes on a Saturday morning to her local church. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Again, I think ICE was hoping that they would get some radical individual so that they could, support some of their false claims. But they picked the wrong victim in this case to mess with. Here she is at work. Again, she spends every day at a Montessori school teacher, not wherever people who are actual domestic terrorists spend their days. She teaches the children. At her initial appearance, we had over a dozen Montessori school parents who showed up to federal court in support of her. I was able to give the court over 50 letters from parents who turned them over to me within maybe 10 hours, saying how empathetic she is, how loving she is, how much a part of the community she is. Again, the exact opposite of a domestic terrorist. Here's a photo that we can now show people. It's the back of her car. That black bag was the bag of clothes that she had collected that morning that she was on her way to deliver. It's now covered with her blood, but you can see it here. Once we get the car back from the FBI, Marimar intends to finish delivering those clothes to her local church. Once we obviously make sure they're not blood-soaked, but I think they're okay inside there. But again, just a visual depiction of the shot-out window, which we'll get to, by Agent Exum, and where she was actually going that day. Lie number 2. Marimar has a history of doxing federal agents. So this was a repeated refrain from the administration, and this is where, again, I'm very upset with the U.S. Attorney's Office, because you have this quote here, right? This was a direct quote put out by Tricia McLaughlin, the Assistant Secretary of DHS, quoting Marimar Martinez. Hey, to all my gang, let's fuck those motherfuckers up. Don't let them take anyone, right? That is an extremely aggressive quote. That actually might support a claim that someone is a domestic terrorist, someone who's calling for violence against ICE agents. The problem is, and the U.S. Attorney's Office knows that, in the discovery, which we'll release today, which I don't think was part of last night's release, someone did say this quote, but it was not Marimar Martinez. It was another individual completely unrelated to Marimar Martinez that came up in an ICE report. So here you have the U.S. Attorney's Office has discovery in their possession. They know that this quote was attributed by their own law enforcement sources to a third party that has nothing to do with Marimar. And yet, not only do they not correct their client, ICE, not only do they not tell the court that this is not correct, but they try to enforce a protective order to not allow us to show the media, look, if you actually look at where this statement came from, it is somebody that is not Marimar Martinez. That's the scary part, right? Again, this isn't some local press person. This is Tricia McLaughlin. She is the Assistant Secretary. She's attributing a quote calling for violence against federal law enforcement to a Montessori school teacher when they have a report that shows they were either too careless to read it, or they just didn't care and they wanted to feed this false narrative that they continue to put out that anyone who gets into any kind of traffic incident with ICE is a domestic terrorist. So if you don't have, I don't think you guys have this. We'll release this right after the press conference. It's a heavily redacted report, but if you call the U.S. Attorney's Office, they will confirm, I believe, that this was not Marimar Martinez. It was a third person, someone else in Chicago who was under investigation, had nothing to do with her. Why they never corrected that from the beginning is beyond me. Why, when anybody calls DHS, they say we stand by all of our statements and won't retract this is beyond me. But we need to demand better from our elected leaders and unelected leaders that you cannot put out false statements like this. The truth is she has no history and she's never doxed law enforcement. Again, they point to this LOL statement that she put that somebody linked one of these ICE agents to his DJ page, which again is not doxing, it's his public business. It probably actually sent him business to the extent it did anything. But Marimar was one of hundreds of people who liked it or shared it on these groups. Lie number 3, Marimar rammed the agents. You guys have now all seen the video, so you know that she didn't ram them, that they rammed her or sideswiped her. You can see it clearly in the video that the agent swerved into Marimar's car. You can see him turn left. There's a 302 that I do not think the U.S. Attorney's Office released that we will release in Agent Exum's interview with the FBI immediately after this happened. He tells the FBI agent who's interviewing him, I veered into her to create space. Okay? That is completely inconsistent with Marimar hitting them. That's consistent with him hitting her. The U.S. Attorney's Office knew this from the beginning. ICE knew this from the beginning. Yet they continue, as recently as yesterday, to put out press statements saying that Marimar rammed them, which is just absolute not true. How do I play this?
Yes, let's see here. So this is the body-worn camera video from the agent in the back seat. Some of you have seen it. Let's see, this.
All right, it's time to get aggressive and get the fuck out. They're just trying to box us in.
We're going to make contact. We're boxed in.
We are boxed in.
So a few things about this. One, I know we're all debating whether ICE should have body cameras. Obviously, we think they should. Here, Agent Exum had a body camera, as well as the other agent. Neither of them had it turned on at the time, right? Had they actually turned on the cameras that we paid for them to have, all of this could have been avoided, because you would have clearly seen that she never drove at this agent and that he shot her as she went by. But Agent Exum never bothered to turn on the camera that the government paid for him to have. So while we debate nationally whether ICE agents should have body cameras, which I think we all think they should, we need to make sure that they're instructed to hit the on switch, because Agent Exum was outfitted with one on this day and he just never turned it on. as well as the other agent in the car. The other thing is, when you watch these videos, you can see these agents are going down Kedzie here in Chicago Saturday morning with heavily, these are automatic weapons, their fingers are on the triggers. One pothole, one kind of swerve by this agent, and anyone on the sidewalk is getting sprayed with bullets. Again, why they're doing this on a beautiful Saturday morning and on the south side of Chicago is beyond me, but they're certainly not making our community safer, and in fact, they're making it worse. You guys know this, or at least those who were following, but even Agent Exum admitted that there was no ramming here, and yet again, our government continues to put out statements as late as yesterday and the day before that Marimar rammed them, which is not true. I was able to question Agent Exum at the destruction of evidence hearing. I asked him, will we both agree that there was no ramming here? Is that fair to say? And Agent Exum said, yes, by my definition, yes, sir. Great, mine too. So, again, are they not even talking to their own agents before they put out these statements? It appears to be so. Lie number 4. And this is a big one, right? Because this is what they had to do to justify the shoot, right? They had to say, why did you shoot this woman, right? The whole point was always we were boxed in. We couldn't move our vehicle. We knew from the beginning, because of our investigators who were able to get videos that even the U.S. Attorney's Office wasn't able to get, that this simply was not true. They were never boxed in and that they were always able to move. Yet they continued to repeat the refrain to the American public because they have this Trump mentality that regardless of whether it's true or false, if you say it enough, some people will believe it, and that's true. If you read the comments online, some people to this day believe that they were boxed in and couldn't move, despite there being a video showing that that's not true. So this was a drawing that was drawn by one of the agents when they were interviewed by the FBI immediately after. So, like, if this were true, then they would actually be telling you guys the truth that they were boxed in. These are supposed to be 3 cars that were in front of the... These are 3 cars that they drew in there, right? In reality, you guys have seen the video. I'll show it here in a second. Those cars don't exist. They weren't there. If they were there, they would have been boxed in. If they were there, they would have been unable to move. That's why the agent drew it, right? Because he knew we just shot a woman. We need to justify that shooting. And how else am I going to protect my partner, Agent Exum, for jumping out of a car and shooting someone within 2 seconds unless I can say we were boxed in? But in fact, when you see the video, those cars don't exist. And yet this administration continues to repeat these lies that they were boxed in. This is the agent's statement. The QFR Tahoe could not go forward, and the QFR team decided to exit the car so they could leave the area or make an arrest. I mean, that is a statement by one federal agent to the FBI within hours of the actual incident, lying about what happened. I mean, they could not go forward is simply not true. And you know it's not true because this is the video. Oops, how do I play this?
Let's see if we get this one going. We got my tech guy here. Thomas, what do you got here? Laptop? So this is from Mario's tire shop.
There you go.
Here, play.
So watch this video, right? 1 car gone, 2 car clearly gone. I mean, they're not stopping, they're not slowing down, they're out of the picture. Here's the agent's vehicle. So if you go back to that drawing that the agent did, there's nobody in front of them. How can they claim they couldn't go forward? We just saw that those cars ahead of them went forward. They drew those cars in to justify a bad shooting. The U.S. Attorney's Office knew about this. They didn't have this video. But they had that drawing, and once they saw this, they knew that those cars didn't exist. Yet nobody corrected the record. Nobody told the judge that this was wrong. Nobody amended the complaint to change this. I mean, these are officers of the court. They have a duty of candor to the court, and yet they allowed this to occur when you can clearly see those 3 cars that were put there by agents just simply did not exist. And again, that was the most frustrating part of this case. Things like this, that even the most far right-wing people, you can't argue that this is a gray area. This just is simply black and white. They drew a picture saying they were trapped when they weren't. Live 5, Agent Exum told the FBI that all 5 shots went through the windshield. Again, if you're trying to justify a bad shoot of Mrs. Martinez, right, the best way to do it is to say she drove straight at me and I shot 5 times through the windshield. Again, if that were true, they might have a point, but that's not true, and we know that's not true. So Agent Exum texted this to friends in the media. This is the day of the shooting. More later, this is posse chat, him and his other Border Patrol agents that have a support group text chain on an encrypted app. More later, but I fired 5 rounds into the windshield of the vehicle. I mean, that's a flat-out lie. And again, the U.S. Attorney's Office recognized they can never call this guy as a witness in trial because the jury wouldn't believe a word he said for reasons like this. He's interviewed by